network such as Akamai, right? So the idea here is, back in the days when we used to have notion of flash crowd. I mean, when something's become very popular, everybody went to that website and then they crashed it, right? So it's either called a flash crowd or slash start effect or whatever, right? So essentially, so if you find something interesting, right? So we have a picture of, I think one of the good examples back then was the Monica Lewinsky, that story or one of those things, right? And essentially everybody came to your site and then you crashed it, right? So the only way to solve the problem would be to spatially co-locate this object. So if I know that all Notre Dame students are going to be interested in something from Microsoft, if I can somehow push it to something closer to Notre Dame, then I win. Right? So then I essentially send all of you to Notre Dame. And if I can have more of these, then I can take the load. So essentially that's what you try to do. And most of the websites do that. So most of the big websites, it's hard to bring them down because they're essentially, there's this Akamai infrastructure throughout the planet, and where you're redirected, right? So you can only bring down your local Akamai stuff. So for example, I think Notre Dame has its own Akamai mirror inside. So anything you go, right? If you go to CNN or something, it kicks you off. Actually, CNN, one of the visitors who came in, the first visitors, mentioned that CNN is no longer the customer, right? So if you go to Microsoft.com, you essentially get kicked to the local mirror, right? For that to work, you don't have infinite storage within each campus, so you have to decide what should go there, right? So Microsoft has to decide that we're going to release Vista tomorrow for public, right? It's going to be very popular, so let's push it to all these sites, right? So that's something that they can predict. But for other stuff, like there's going to be this video that everybody's going to be interested in, let's push it, right? You have to know what those things are. You have to know how long to keep those things, because you have to look at kind of the past to say this particular stuff will be useful for so much. So now you're turning it around to a cache replacement policy on each of these mirrors. So figuring out what objects should be there, how long they should be there, what format, and all those things, essentially means that you need to have a sense of what the stream characteristics and what people do with those stuff, right? And I'm sure Akamai, that's essentially what is good about them. I mean, they know exactly what objects should be kept for how long, where, and for those you need like these kind of studies that this paper talked about, right? And back in the days, AT&T Labs used to publish a lot of things about how long people stay on the phone records and all those things, right? Yes.
Would it be possible, like, how does Akamai update their stuff? Is it like time slices, or does what if they all just attack the one server at once and crashed it when they're trying to update?
No, they won't release that record, right? I mean, that's their bread and butter, right? I mean, the concept of having all these caches all over the place is trivial, right? And if you had caches which are infinite size, then Akamai goes away, right? But it's not infinite, so they have finite amount of storage. So how to destroy Akamai is not something that they want to advertise, right?
No, I'm wondering if the Akamai cache would update itself and they would all update themselves at once.
Yeah, I know. So if you know that, then you can attack them, right? You attack these little things to see what to do, right? No, they don't want to release any of those, right? I mean, that's their technology, right? So supposedly they're good enough that you cannot knock out all the big sites. Obviously, you can go to my web page and destroy those, right? So if I advertise on /dart that I have porn in my web page, right? I'm sure you'll bring down Notre Dame website in no time because everybody's trying to download it, right? And they're not Akamai-ized, so he'll bring down the site, and not just the site, it'll bring down the whole Notre Dame, right? Hey, that's a good way to test the great firewall, right? Post something. Yeah, but the good thing is OIT will be after you. All the financial liabilities for protecting intellectual property, right? What? So And she's excellent in two reasons. One is she's been doing this forever at HP Labs, and she usually takes in summer interns on a regular basis, and they do productive publications, right? So Meenakshi used to be with HP Labs, and now she's a faculty at Indiana. So if any of you are looking for, so one of the things you want to look for if you're doing a summer internship is whether you're hooking up with somebody who's into publication mode, and whether they will let you be a co-author, right? And she's one excellent researcher to on both counts, right? So I'm not going to actually go through each and everything that the paper says, because it's chock full of information which are way beyond the what we have, right? One of the things, so they looked at two different servers. One is the HPC, which is supposedly for external users to look at media, and another one was internal to HP Labs. And it looks like these are videos of lectures of whoever, and it's only meant for internal HP use, right? So it's not accessible from outside, right? And the logs are over 2 years, right? And this is from these logs were collected a long time back. Seems like, right? Because the paper talks about 56 kbps or 128 kbps as like high speed, right? Right? This paper was like 5 years back, and most of you may remember those days. I mean, those are not that far off, right?
Oh, 56 kbps. God, that's obnoxious.
Was that sustained though? Was that sustained?
It's what?
Was that guaranteed though? Or was this just dial-up days?
It must be dial-up days, but this was not. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like dial-up. Back in the days, this is how it used to be, right? And this back in the days was 5 years ago, right? Which is so unreal, right? In terms of how these things change. So we have to, so when you read this stuff, imagine how this will be for what we do right now, right? So they have so it looks like they have two sets of users. One is the corporate, the HP Labs users who are looking at these videos, lectures of some things that you think would be important, right? So some things that, like for example, you have a visitor to HP Labs, somebody videotapes those. So the other researchers who couldn't make it to this session are looking at the stuff, right? So you expect those users to be different from the HPC users, which are mostly HP advertisements and looks like those are kinds of stuff, right? So those you would expect them to be like short, small and sweet, and you don't want them to be visible for. I mean, you don't want users to look at a 60-minute worth of HP video, advertisement video, right? But surprisingly, some of them are similar, right? So, like some of the results that they find where one of the things that they find is most of the sessions were smaller than 10 minutes, right? Regardless of what they are. So regardless of whether they're lecture kind of stuff or advertisement kind of stuff, people tend to, most of the videos are less than 10 minutes. That's all they watch, regardless of what the actual content is. And right, and there are a few which were long and were accessed for long, and those few tended to be on the HP Lab side, which is kind of what you expect, right? So it seems like people tend to kind of look at the video, see if they're interested. If they're not interested, they don't watch anymore. But if they're interested, they continue for the whole hour, right? And they make an observation that incomplete sessions were usually on the initial half, right? So if you tended to break after watching something, you usually watch the first few minutes before you breaking, right? Which seems like that's all you could do. I mean, it's not like, I mean, most of the videos you are only allowed to start watching from the beginning. So I'm not sure why that's surprising or something that you would want to watch, right? So I can't start watching from the half an hour point on a video unless I start watching from the first and then I say jump to the half an hour point, right? But these have implications on how things should work. So think about how this will be for, say, if you're building a YouTube or some model, right? So if you assume that people are going to watch the first few minutes, so you better be ready to serve the first few minutes. And there are only few people who are going to stick around to watch the whole thing, right? So if you want to, so if you capture the lectures like here and you want to service it, right? The first few minutes are the most important. They are the ones which have to be serviced. The rest of the lectures, only people who really have to be here, like for example, if you didn't attend this lecture, you're the only one who's going to look at the whole thing, right? So you can put the rest of the stuff in something else. You can put it on a CD or DVD or somewhere where it's not as important as the first few minutes, right? And so another observation they made was sessions with interactive stuff. Like for example, if you have to do fast forward or whatever, it depended on how long the video was. If it's a long video, people tended to do fast forward or pause or whatever. If it's small video, people didn't tend to do that, right? Like again, it was not clear to me how you would know that, because at least most of you, like if you look at YouTube or something, right? It caches the whole thing. If you see the little bar which says like what is cached, right? So after that you could play it or rewind it or do whatever. That won't be seen by the server, right? Yes.
Couldn't they just like record what your button presses were? Like
So
they're using that flash type thing.
So that's one of the limitation of these kind of studies, right? So if I can instrument your flash player to collect those statistics, then yes, I could. But if you're HP Labs, you don't have access to that, right? So you really need you really have to be Adobe to do that, right? Adobe has to instrument the flash player to send information about what you're doing, right? And I think most users would be very unhappy if Adobe was doing that, right? You expect, or at least I expect, that when I go to YouTube keeps track of what I'm watching, right? So if I'm watching all stuff that I should not be watching, whatever that is, right? I expect YouTube to know what I'm watching, right? I don't expect Adobe to keep track of what I'm doing on the player, right? So that's a very touchy subject. So if Adobe may be doing that, but Adobe is not sure publishing a paper which says that, oh, we watched this stuff and we notice that people are usually skipping videos, right? And especially they don't want to say people, if it's a porn video, they really watch it over and over again. You're not saying that at all, right? Because that doesn't happen. Yes.
Seriously, with Windows Media, it seems that most of the time the streams are set up as live streams.
Mm-hmm.
So people are fast forwarding and they have to pull the stream from the servers. Maybe that's how they're saying that for the HPC.
So my point is, if it's a 30-second video, right?
Right.
I'm too slow to actually go and so these are live streams, but they're not live, right? So they're being streamed. I mean, they're being downloaded in some sense, right? So for the 30-second video, and your browser is set to do 30 seconds, so your browser would have cached the whole thing before I get a chance to do anything with it, right?
Right. I'm not sure how much. I don't think Windows Media, at least in those days, probably didn't buffer very much. I mean, it buffers a little bit, but I don't know.
That's so funny, right? We say like in those days, right? Like
right.
3 years back.
Because if you watch like Windows Media on like CNN or something, it does sometimes fail. I mean, the buffering is really close to the actual stream.
But I thought like even in those days it still did 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the time is.
I don't know what it was, but I thought it was like 30 seconds was the but they didn't go into the details of like what it was back then and what. I mean, obviously you don't know what the client has set up, right? And again, that would mean that you have to instrument the browsers. You could do that, such a study for HP Labs users, but you couldn't do that for people out in the wild because you don't have access to the browser, right? You don't have access to the browser, and even if you do have access to the browser, you have to get consent from people, and the people who you get consent may not be the ones who are actually interesting, right? So if I ask, I want to see how each of you look at the lecture videos that we capture, right? Can I instrument all your videos to monitor exactly how much you watch and how far you go, right? I'm not sure how many of you would accept that intrusion, right? And even if you do, so if the percentage of people who accept is smaller, then we don't know if that's a typical behavior, right? And then we don't even know if you know that you're being monitored, you may actually do something different than what you do otherwise, right? Yes?
Well, what do you think Google's going to do with YouTube now?
I haven't a clue. Because I'm still worried, like, the whole issue of copyrights, right?
Yeah, they're going to get sued.
They're going to get schools. They're going to get sued, but they also have like plenty of money to fight it out, right? So I think they're just too big for normal you and me to sue them, right? So it has to be like Warner Brothers suing Google, right? And
But I don't think they do that because they throw on movie trailers and stuff on there, like NBC.
So
ABC, they throw stuff on.
that's what I'm saying. Like they co-opt these things, right? So if IBM wants to sue Microsoft, nothing usually happens, right? Then they both kind of like declare. I mean, they're like, okay, I have 10,000 lawyers. You have like 20,000 lawyers, right? Like, okay, fine, right? Let's go, right?
Well, but Microsoft fights by proxy a lot, which is what I think is going to happen. Microsoft, backed SCO.
Yeah.
To sue IBM.
But for if you're doing by proxy like that, right? Google can stay on and fight with you, right? Just like IBM can stay on and fight with you, right?
Oh yeah, I'm just saying. I think they will get sued, but it'll be a Microsoft backed.
Which is inconsequential, right? Because I mean, Google can stay and fight with you forever, right? Unless, so I think Google has what 130 cap market cap, say 130 billion or something, right? So if it's like a proxy like that, they can stay on and fight. 20, 30 years is it's what you really worry about, right? Yeah.
Plus, you have the policy of if you send an email, just a single email saying that whatever is on their web is something that's copyrighted, they'll take it down within hours. Like,
oh yeah. I'm saying if you set up YouTube right now in your DOM, right, and you have the same policy, right, you'll be shut down in half a second, right? Because they're gonna say, I have 1,000 lawyers, right? And you say, okay, I fold, right? It doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong because you just can't fight with them, right? So I actually talked to one of the patent lawyers at IBM, right? And this is what he said. He said, like, I don't know how many of you know about patents and how they work, right? How many of you know how patents work? Software patents, right? How many of you have a positive view of patents? So this is a patent lawyer from IBM, right? So I was at IBM Research, so we were talking about this stuff. So he said the way you patent stuff is, this is a very skeptical view. I mean, this is probably not the view you're gonna get from, like, I don't know, from somebody, right? So he said, okay, the way we patent is, you claim the highest stuff. You claim that I invented computer science, right? And then you say, maybe not computer science, I just invented multimedia, right? And maybe not multimedia. So you kind of throw all these claims, right? So, and the patent office would throw everything out, right? So you hope that they don't give you too high at stuff. In that case, it's not useless. It's useless. And you hope that they don't knock out enough to go to the weakest stuff. I mean, how many of you watched the deal or no deal kind of thing, right? So if they give you that patent which says that you invented computer science, it's no use because everybody laughs at you, right? Because you can't go and enforce to say, from now on, computer science belongs to me. So that patent is useless, right? If they give you something which is very small and they say, I invented how to do in bubble sort, how to solve variables called I and J, right? That's useless because any pattern, you have to enforce it, right? You have to go after and say, did you call your variables I and J, right? If you call it J and K, that pattern is not useful, right? So you want to find this middle ground, right? But he said, like, even if you find the middle ground, going after somebody is very hard, right? So if I go back and say, so they have wiggle room out, because if you say it like if YouTube has something which says like it should be 400 by 300, so if you do 401 by 399, that's not covered because that's off, right? So he said, so essentially what you do is, once you have enough patents, the other person comes in, and then you kind of figure out, so you kind of compromise. So based on how big a profile you have, you compromise. So he said, guess how we figure out if your patent is worth something. So like let's assume you have Microsoft and IBM sitting down, and these are lawyers, right? So IBM has like I think 120 patent lawyers, and Microsoft has whatever, right? So these lawyers are deciding whether the profiles are, equal weight. Guess how they decide whether it's equal weight?
That's a coin.
No. They decide with equal weight. Like I said, with equal weight. So they decide.
The way?
Yes. So you said, if you look at the patterns, if you have a pattern which is 10 pounds and I have a pattern which is 10 pounds, I'm not joking. He said, I'm a lawyer, right? So we decide based on these patterns, right? Except if you have something which is like so fundamental that can stick out, right? So Einstein's thesis is, which is like 13 or 20 pages, right? It's much less worth than another thesis which is 100 pages just because it's heavier, right? Unless it's something special, right? So that's what they do. So he said, so now we go off and write a patent. I was like, I don't want to do that. I mean, we never, So I think
Make yours really, 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 really long. And then it'll be
One word
worth
per page.
everything, yeah.
Pictures? Just
Yes.
It's like 72 font.
yes. Oh no.
Except on the first 10 pages, use like regular font, and then every other page will have like one.
And actually getting a patent is very easy, right? It just you need money, right? You could patent anything, right? Patent.
You
Yes.
see the Microsoft patent the Apple iPod interface because I forgot the patent it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So those kinds of patents are gotcha, right? But you can't do anything about it, right? So Microsoft can sue Apple, but I'm sure Apple
They're gonna work.
has something back, right? So essentially, he said, so they both sit and see like the way the thing, right? So Apple comes up with like, I have 100 pounds of patents and they have 200 pounds patent, then they figure how much they should do the stuff. So then they get into a cross patent thing, right? So IBM has a cross patent with Microsoft, with all these companies. So all these companies have cross patent, which basically says that whatever patent you have, I won't sue you kind of thing, right? So now all these people have a truce, right? So if you're a small, like if you have patent for, let's say, iPod interface, right? You walk up and you actually have patent which really matters, which Apple is clearly violating, right? So the discussion starts off with, I have 120 lawyers, how many do you have? Once you go past that, I have like this many weight stuff, right? So all I do is tell you that you're violating every one of my patents, right? So the logic here is, I have to say them. All I say is you are violating patent number 1340. It's up to you to figure out that you're not violating. So you have to do the discovery and all those things to come back to me and say you're not violating any of those, and then sue and then make me lose, right? And I'm like, okay, I have 130 billion sitting in my bank. What do you have, right? So unless you are like a idiot lawyer who has nothing to do, no lawyer takes up the case, right? So you don't want to go against Apple and say this interface is, I patented it. So you don't want to, what?
Creative got a couple billion out of it.
So I'm saying you have to be big. So I'm saying it's not worth it if you're small, right? And then they do. So the whole thing is so broken, right? So essentially that's I think what will happen with the YouTube, right? So if you're Warner Brothers, you can sue them, but you'd rather co-opt them rather than sue and win the stuff. So that may be what will happen with. We got sidetracked, but essentially that, YouTube may survive because of those kind of stuff, right? So another thing that they notice is like high locality of access. Like some of the contents are very popular, and then they stop being popular. So they actually looked at the spatial, what kind of media there are and how they're accessed and stuff, and how they accessed over time, right? And that's an excellent way to look at it, because that's stuff you want, right? To see if a video becomes popular, how long would it be popular, right? What's that access? Because that helps you decide caching algorithms, right? So a lot of papers would use these results to build these things, build your own servers, right? Except unfortunately, the way the field is changing so quickly, we all refer to this as like back in the days, things used to be like this, right? Which is not a good sign, right? The other information that 20% of objects are not used is also important, right? So if you have lots of contents, then some of the contents are not popular, they're not being used at all. So you have to be careful, because if you store these on your cache, then you're paying a cost. You're paying a cost for storing these things which are not popular at all, right? And accesses do not follow a zip distribution. Zip is a very, very popular distribution for web kind of workload, right? So zip is essentially a long tail distribution, which means that there are some objects which are extremely popular. There are a whole bunch of objects which are no one cares, but there's a long list of them, right? So most of our home pages are not that popular, except like few ones which are extremely popular, right? Whereas the model is like more of it's not just few which are very popular. A whole bunch of them are popular. And they also noticed that most of the newer videos are very popular initially. Like most of the accesses come within the first week. Within first 5 weeks, you see 80% of the accesses, and then it kind of goes off, right? It sounds like it's like a movie effect, right? Movie theaters, the first weekend is when they make all the money, and after that, it's no one cares. I mean, it kind of drops out, right? So they actually had 666K over like close to 3 years, and within the internal server, they had like 14K over sort of like 2 years. I mean, 14K for 21 months and 666K for 30 months, right? To put the things in comparison, that's how it was back in the days. But now, YouTube, I think they do 100 million videos a day, right? 65,000 uploaded every day, and I think the more interesting fact is people hang around a lot, right? Unlike those days, people hang around a lot and look at these things, and 20 million unique users, right? I think this survey was 1,000 or so unique users, right? Actually, I think I have a different slide. 98% of the workload from this paper were from HP, right? Even for the HPC, 96% were from HP, which I don't understand what that means, because then essentially both of them are within from HP, right? And so if you're within HP, why would you have dial-up speeds? I don't know, because even in 2001, right? Beat HP at that time, they didn't have like Ethernet and like fast Ethernet and stuff. I mean, it's not like they were all doing dial-up within their own company, right? The other thing you notice is like one of the studies about like how many packet loss and stuff, right? Within HP, you're supposed to have lots of packet loss. They never say why, right? It looked like the pigeons were carrying the bits back and forth within the HP labs, right? So I don't know why that sounded very strange, because the network that we have at Notre Dame is a lot older than what HP labs had back then. I mean, our like the Fitzpatrick network was last updated in like 70s or something, right? They're going to change it now, but so those are kind of strange. But this is the important part. I mean, we don't know what accesses that they saw, how it relates to what YouTube would see, right? I would love to know what YouTube is seeing, a Google video, right? Actually, YouTube, they're restricted to what, 30, what's the thing for normal users? Like 10 minutes? Okay. 10 minutes is all you can upload, right? Unless you become director, which they seem to give out easily, right?
Yeah, it's pretty easy,
Yeah. Except I couldn't upload any of the videos because it always crashes. I get internal error with their site, right? We would love to understand what this is doing, right? So if any of you can get access to that data, right? If you're in an academic field, you can get a PhD in a year, right? Because essentially you can write like so many papers. Right? You can look at the data upside down, like all over the place, right? Because everybody would love to hear that data, right? If you say there are 100 million users, right? If you publish, one which says like, what's the gender of the people who are requesting this stuff? What is which country they're coming from, or like all kind of stuff, right? Unfortunately, it's impossible to get access to that logs. Right?
Well, has anyone done anything with that AOL search data that got released? Everyone just like not done anything with it because they thought it was an invasion of privacy.
I think somebody would still publish,
It was a
right?
search file.
Someone released like what, 500,000 users searching?
Yeah. So the problem, there are two problems, right? One is YouTube would not want you to see this because there's a competitive advantage. even if it's not a competitive advantage, right? They're liable for any privacy stuff. So in the case of AOL released data, AOL did not release information about who you are, right? They just released the text of what you are searching for, and you can infer from that, right? If you see something which says like, Surendar Chandra home a lot, then you kind of infer somebody's looking for me kind of stuff, right? So that's how people looked at the stuff, right? And I think one of the William was doing some study like this to see what people are doing with Netw, right, in 2003. We hashed it because we didn't want to have privacy information and stuff. But then you look back, you're like, we wish we didn't hash the information. Then we can know what people are looking for and stuff like that, right? So he's sitting on a lot of information which could potentially be, right? I mean, you can kind of see what people are looking for, right?
Yes.
So give us something that would be strange.
I can look it up now. Well, there's a lot of
some information that cannot be published, or like I don't want to know about it. Yeah.
there's a lot of, obviously all the music and movies, but so there's a lot of requests for brand new movies that are out in the theaters that people make videos of and then package up as a huge zipped up files. And porn has really interesting search characteristics. So most of the time when the people are looking for movies or for music, there are a small number of search terms.
Before you start, like, tell us like what you actually capture.
Oh, so I basically created a little client that would connect to the Netw network, and basically it did nothing but just sit there passively forwarding messages. So every message that came to it from other peers, it would log it, and every message that it would send out, it would log. And so basically, it became an Netw.
So the sort of messages you're looking for is like if you go into Netw and you search for something, right? You ask your peer. So he's one of the peer who's sitting there, doesn't have anything, but he's just seeing what you're asking, right? So this is like sort of the intrusive stuff that like you were mentioning, right?
It doesn't share any content, it just acts as essentially a router for all the messages. But every single message that comes in, I can capture, and then for query messages, I log what the actual query string is, and if I get any responses, I log what the name of the files that match the original queries are, and the file size, and things like that. So you see some very interesting things.
So he doesn't have access to the content. So that's one of the reasons why Notre Dame couldn't shut it down, because so if you ask for porn that somebody else has and you get it, right? So he can see that you requested a porn if it went through him, right? And then the response that somebody has something, he would know. But he's not involved with the actual contents, which is important because otherwise all the lives will be after him, right?
But like, porn is really funny because people are very specific about.
But see, the problem is quantifying and publishing this part, right? Like how do you know what is porn, right? Like, I mean, no, I know how you know it's for porn, but I'm saying you can't. I mean, you don't want to say it, right?
Yeah, I don't want to say it, but things just stand out. And it was actually kind of funny because when I first started vlogging these, I just would have a X term up that was just displaying, live, what was being captured. And every so often I'd look up and be like, oh my god. I didn't even know that existed.
So one of the problems, or one of the good things about no, so we're not publishing what contents people are searching, but he's writing paper on what the mechanics of what happens, right? Because I mean, obviously you don't want to go up and say, so you would love to say 80% of the requests are for porn, right? Then you have to define what porn is, how you know what porn is, and go through all the details, which I don't think any of you want to do that, because then it's very hard for you to get a job except in the porn industry, right?
Well, you just you publish that part of the stuff in like a small conference over here, and then you just reference the paper, and then you just make sure that paper is really hard to get access to.
Well, no, but why you do that, right? Like, who cares about publication which no one can read?
Just to say that, oh yeah, we define what porn is. It's over here though.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, that's academic suicide, right? Academic industry suicide, right?
Internet dirty secret, no one wants to talk.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So you publish stuff about the contents, right? You say that all the movies seem to be for 30 minutes, right? You don't want to say what they are, right? So, you know. So I think he actually has records from 2003, 2005, and 2006, right? So you can potentially go through and figure out. So you would like to find the good stuff that you can publish and say things. So if somebody if he goes to mentions this to somebody, and somebody says like, how much of it is porn, right? You don't want to answer the question, right?
Oh, really don't know.
I mean, yeah, we didn't look at it. The official answer is we didn't look at it, right? The unofficial answer is we'll talk offline, right? Because this is not something you look at, right? So the other thing we were looking at was trying to see what people are doing with iTunes. I mean, obviously this is before the Notre Dame shutdown. We can actually figure out what people are sharing on iTunes, and I actually tried to download to see what list of songs you have, right? And again, you want to be careful not to. Not to answer the question, how much of it do you think is stolen, right?
High percentage.
I don't think anybody wants to say that. I mean, Apple is not going to say, oh, by the way, iTunes, 80% of the songs were stolen, right? You never see that statistic, right? What is the percentage of user contents which are stolen?
Well, I can understand their fear of being like, possibly having that shut down or legal action, but I still don't understand the fear of like admitting that, oh, porn is 60 or 70% of internet traffic, and here are the search patterns when people are looking at porn, and this is how they differ from.
So the fear is if you proclaim this is porn, right? So first thing is Notre Dame will shut it down, right? I mean, we are trying to build the great firewall for unknown reasons, right? If I come up and say all Notre Dame users, 40% of what you guys look is porn, right? That's the end of it, right? I mean, I don't know any other way you can go about it. I mean, I can't fight for it. I can't say there's some good educational uses for it, right? But I can't do that, right? So I don't want to mention it, right? Would you want me to
Well, I mean, would they actually just shut down the internet? Like, well, you guys are looking at a bunch of bad stuff for the majority of the time, so we're going to stop you temporarily.
OIT doesn't want to go there because then they have to tell you that they were monitoring what you were looking at, right? So OIT would never use that argument. If OIT is smart, they won't use the argument that 80% of all you guys look is porn, right? Then the question is, why were you looking at what I was looking at, right? I mean, they can only say the media traffic is 80%, right? The people are watching multimedia, like MP3s, right? Or videos, right?
Or YouTube all day long, I guess.
Or lots of porn all day long.
Or.
Yeah, that's a very kind of so there are a lot of subtle things with why you want to do that or you don't want to do that, right?
Wouldn't the porn industry be interested in those numbers though?
Oh, they would, but they don't care about telling you.
Do a PhD in that?
Sure, they hook you up with some nice
Oh, yeah. That's what I said. If you quantify this and you say you can do excellent research on the porn industry, then you'll find a job there, right? I'm saying most of you probably don't want a job, narrowly.
Extra benefits.
I mean, you don't want to call yourself multimedia systems researchers for the porn industry, right? So.
porn doctor.
Some people would.
What?
Apparently some people would.
There's money quickly.
Yeah, but so there are a whole lot of reasons why you don't want to mention these things, right? Which is kind of a funny game you play because it's out there and you want to. When you write a paper, we don't actually mention that fact, but you mention everything else, right? You say these objects are 43 kilobytes and they were accessed for half a minute, so your routing algorithms and all those things, this is what we did and everything. But you hope that nobody would ask the question like, so what was inside the movies? My answer for my own PhD thesis was, I never looked at what's inside the movies, which I didn't. I did look at some, but I don't acknowledge what it is. So I was looking at what kind of JPEG images are out there on the internet, right? Obviously, I think we collected like, millions of images, and obviously I couldn't have looked through everything, right? But there's so many of them, and so you can look at the image size to guess what they were, right? And you're usually right? So if you look at an image which is like this big, it's usually porn. If you look at an image which is like this, it's usually a banner ad, right? But he never mentioned the word what they are, because I never looked at it, right? So he will argue that he never looked at what the strings were. He just looks at them as bunch of ASCII characters, right? That's a safe.
Just strings.
Yeah, just strings, yes, right? So
Strings tokenized to different keywords that.
Come on, you sure you don't want a job in the porn industry?
And if somebody asks you, what is the most popular search term you see? If it happens to be like Bible, you mention it. If it happens to be something else, I don't know. I mean, it's just, you don't say it,
One
right?
part of it was Bible, and that part of it was good. But
So anyway, so
Really interested in stuff. I'm concerned.
but so, like if you're doing this for the class lecture, right? You can freely explain exactly what people do. I mean, what part of lecture people want to look at is because, I guess most lectures don't go into discussions on how to define porn, right? So you kind of okay, right? So the interesting part to me was like their video collection was like 42 to 48 gig, which seems so small because even one of the lectures would probably be that size, right? So one of the things that you would like to know, like for example, if you're doing this for a class lecture thing, is what quality you should transcode and what is more popular, right? And for example, I randomly chose for the OS class 1 megabits per second stream for no reason. So I would like to know what is a good stream, and you would like to analyze this data and look at the stuff, right? We try to do that. There's not enough stuff to do that, right? Hopefully, we can use this data to convince Notre Dame. I don't know what, right? So Notre Dame actually has plans of making all the class lectures into a podcast stream, right? So they actually the first thing they did was registered podcast at nd.edu, right? When they heard the word podcast, registered podcast at nd.edu, so no one else can do that, right? So I was talking to some of the OIT guys, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we want to do podcast. We want to do podcast every lecture in the university, right?" I don't think they actually thought through on what that means, because you would need multiple terabytes per semester to store, and you have to figure out how to get this stuff, right? So, what?
Isn't that OIT asked that?
Yeah. So one of the other things they would like to do is they like to move it. So they said, if you can do it with Google, if Google can give this to us for free, maybe we want to use that, right? Is there a reason why you don't want to use Google other than the intellectual property, right?
And I was going to say, Apple has that iTunes University.
Yes. And
does that store it on Apple's, or is that stored on the local server?
I was actually talking to the Apple guy who does this stuff. So I was like, so where do you store it? He was like, we can store it anywhere you want. You can store it in your school, or we can store it in our site. Like, do you realize that you can actually potentially need lots of storage? Oh, we have a lot of money. We can buy all the storage.
I like that idea.
So, give me a reason why you don't want to store it in Google? Yeah.
There's a control issue involved, not just from an intellectual property standpoint, but from the university says, okay, we want to increase, bandwidth, or, we want these videos more accessible, or less accessible, or, and once you put them up on Google, you have lost, unless it's a Google at ND partnership, right? If you're just using the generic Google tools, you've lost that element of control.
That's one of the aspects, right? The other aspect is if you move it all to Google, because Google is free storage, right? Google can potentially store. I think I forget what the number is. I forget what the estimate was. Let's say 70 terabyte. I think we need 70 terabytes to record all the lectures of all the classes per semester, right? Which is not that big a storage if you think about it. I think it's like 300, 400 hard disk. we can do that, right? And I think it shouldn't cost you more than 25,000 or something, right? If you get rid of, the storage I was talking about before, it should be 25, 30K, entirely possible, right? But this is cheaper way to do that through Google, right? Not just paying for bandwidth. We don't have bandwidth. We have 1 gigabits per second out of Notre Dame to Chicago, right? Which apparently is a big number, right? But it's not, right? Remember the graph I had last week which shows how much you can serve, right? So if you had the 70 terabytes of storage out in the Google, right? You can barely serve like 0.1 of that internally, right? It's good to serve to everybody else, but it's not good for us, right? So when Apple talks about hosting this content at, they're like, oh, don't worry about it, we'll host it at Apple. That's no use, right? Yes, it's useful for somebody else because Apple can potentially have infinite bandwidth out. So unless Notre Dame updates the in-link to infinity, it's no use to host it elsewhere, right? So I was asking, so even if it forget about anybody accessing it, right? If I want to upload it, right? So suppose we all do this stuff and we're uploading like 70 terabytes out, right? That means our network will be clogged, right? And whoever I talk to at Apple, they're like, oh, don't worry about it, it'll all be solved. But whatever you thought was good enough, it won't. That's one of the things I like about multimedia systems, right? You can think of the fastest machine you can buy on a laptop, desktop, or whatever, right? A fastest machine, lots of memory, lots of network, whatever, right? I can think of an easy way to kill that, right? Just try to do multimedia to encoding or store or whatever. Things just fly, right? Most of your laptop, if you don't use any of the video, audio, or any of those stuff, they're probably great for whatever you want to do. But the fastest machine you have, right? Try to play a HD QuickTime movie, right?
Our advisor was trying to do that today. Didn't work.
Yeah, same thing. HD 1920 by 1080, 30 frames per second movie, right? Try to play it on any machine, right? I think the quad-core Mac ought to be able to play that. What machine do you guys try?
I don't know. Our advisor tried to play it directly off of the CD, and that didn't.
Twice.
CD? So you encoded it to a CD?
Yeah, it was just in the DVD format, I think.
Yeah.
It was just in DV. It was in the raw.
Oh.
The raw capture format.
Yeah, so like that Mac can do half DV capture, half speed from that camera, right? Which is doing 1440 by 1080, right? To upload it, right? Basically upload it and then do initial bit of decompression. It can do half the speed, and that's the fastest, I guess, right? Like 2.1 dual core machine, right? So 1 gigabits per second sounds like a lot. I mean, if you talk to OIT, they're like, oh, it became 1 gigabits per second, right? But that's, if you look at that graph, it's we can very easily do this stuff. So one of the stuff we noticed from the OS class, right? Some of the lectures were downloaded 300 times, right, from the undergrad OS class. I have no idea why, but 300 times doesn't sound. I mean, I just don't see why somebody would like follow this stuff, right? But apparently they do, right? So 300 times doesn't sound a lot, right? But each video is 400, let's say average 400 meg, right? So 400 times 300. Whatever that is, that is being served off of by us, right? And if you do the math, I mean, gigabits per second it's very easy to swamp it, right? But anyway, so it's kind of funny that their logs were like 40. So this is the hardest part with coming up with the paper for this class, because even if the paper was published last year, right? YouTube last year was probably servicing like 2 million users and 1,000 videos a day, and then the next day it's like 3 million users, So I think at the end of July it used to be 75. It's growing exponentially, kind of stuff, right? So some of the other stuff that the paper talked about, I'm trying to get it out, mostly because we want to see what that means for something else that you would like to build. Yeah, so they had two kinds of videos, and most of the videos tend to be small, and there are very few which are like lectures and stuff which tend to be long, right? So if you were to guess, what do you think is the normal length of a YouTube video?
5 minutes.
I guess shorter.
Minute and a half.
What do you base it on?
The ones I've watched.
Yeah.
So what is the ones you watched?
Music videos.
Okay, so I'm saying we can infer what they are based on like inferring like that, right? So if you're watching music videos, it's probably like 4 minutes, right? Or if you're watching like TV clips, right? Then you have to find the time between advertisements on a typical TV show, right? And that's probably what you're uploading, right? You can kind of use that to guess what the sizes ought to be, right? Because I don't think it's going to be a general distribution. I don't think it's going to be people putting other stuff. I mean, it's either stolen from a TV or music video. So it's likely to be based off of that, right? Whereas here they can go with the lectures and say the lectures would be a certain length. So if you look at the university lectures, I think it'll usually be hour, right? Because the tape runs out after hours. So I'm kind of limited to that hour thing. So you kind of know what the distribution should be, right? And I think most of the stuff in YouTube are TV segments or little chunks, so it's probably like a few minutes and what have you, right? So even if they increase the length to more than 30 minutes, I don't think you're going to see a whole bunch of hour movies, right? Because I guess you can have the whole TV program, but it's probably better to have lots of little chunks, right? Which is not clear to me, like how much of it was buffer